Hey guys, welcome to another Eurorack tutorial video. We're continuing our Roland System-500 series. So quick recap, it's a series of modules that Roland partnered with Meleco with, and they're sort of resurrecting that vintage classic analog sound from the 70s and 80s, heavily inspired by the Roland System-700 and 100M modulars that Roland used to make. So we're concluding our series out of the 4 modules. So if you haven't watched the other ones, make sure to check those out on my channel. But this one, we're doing the 531, which is a 6-channel mixer module. So mixers are cool to have in your modular because as you start accumulating more different sound sources, it starts to get kind of painful if you want to blend them all in. And what's cool about this module is you have nice sliders, so it feels like a real mixer, and you have mute buttons and pan control. So let's go over the front panel and see what all the functionalities are, and then we're going to do some patching so you can get a feel for the kinds of stuff you can do. So let's do it. All right, so the front panel is fairly straightforward. At the top here, you have your 6 different inputs. Below that, you have these nice toggle mute buttons, so you can mute them all in and out. Then you have your standard volume faders. Below that, you have these little pots for controlling the pan left and right. Below those, you have CV control over the pan, so you can assign an LFO to switch your left and right field, etc., or a sequencer or whatever. Down here, you have your master volume. So next to the volume, you have 2 separate sets of stereo outputs, 1 1/4 inch, so you can feed it into your standard mixer or other outboard gear. And then you have your 2 kind of Eurorack sized, which I believe is a little bit less than 1/8 inch, but you can use your standard Eurorack patch cables here, so you can feed that signal into other modules or into an interface like I have here. On the side here, you have a headphone jack, a 1/4 inch, and headphone volume. So this is super handy if you want to just jam with your Eurorack standalone. So I used to have a headphone module in my 1U here by IntelliGel, so I had that covered already. But if you don't have that space, this is super convenient to have if you just want to kind of boot up your modular and do a little jamming without having to boot up your whole system or go through your DAW if you're doing it that way. Super handy to have. And finally, up here, you have an external pre-input. So this is 1/4 inch as well. And here you can feed a stereo or mono signal. And you actually have a switch for the type of preamp you want. So if you have a mic signal, you choose mic. And if you have a line level signal, you choose line. So you can plug a microphone straight into here or standard kind of stereo line gear from another module or like another hardware unit, like a drum machine or something, or from an external mixer if you're using outboard gear. So it's a great way to interface with your existing non-Eurorack or non-modular gear. And then this is the fader for, or the slider for the gain for this preamp, so you can adjust it depending on the volume of the source you have. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is patch out the audio outputs of the mixer into my audio interface here. All right, so now that we plugged in the main outs, we can start feeding any kind of signal through here. So I'm going to patch in a simple sine wave oscillator just to get a flavor for what's going on here. I can bring up the slider, you can hear the volume, and then I can toggle mute with this button, which is super convenient, especially if you have a kind of elaborate patch with the drum modules and samplers and oscillators and noise and a very complex thing. It's really great for live performance. You can quickly toggle things out. Like you can mute a kick drum if you just feed a kick drum into here. Super handy to have. And then let's demo the pan control. So I can pan this left or right. And make sure you're wearing headphones or really nicely placed monitors to hear the full effect of the panning. And so now we can just keep building signals. So I can feed a pink noise into the second input here. I can unmute the oscillator, bring up the noise. All right, so while we have this super simple patch setup, let's demo the CV control over the pan control. So I'm going to unmute my oscillator and then I'm going to feed a simple LFO into the pan control. So I plug in the control. And if you have headphones, you can hear that the left and right is being modulated. And obviously you can feed like a sample and hold to get more random stuff. And of course this is handy to apply subtle modulation to create a stereo field, especially if you have multiple sound sources. You can imagine having like 4 different oscillators, each slightly moving left and right in the stereo field, which would give you a cool effect. All right, so I've set up a slightly more complicated patch. I've got 4 different inputs here. So 2 oscillators, a noise source, and a sampler. So let's audition them real quick. So the first one is the sampler here. Just a simple trigger of the STS using the tempi. Then We've got the 510 here. Simple oscillator low pass filter combo. Then we've got a noise source coming from the 555 going through the 505 being filtered. And then finally we have the Z3000 going also through the 505 on a separate filter channel. So we can control that here. It's being high pass filtered. And then I can slowly blend them all in together and kind of play the patch using almost like an additive approach. And finally bring in the noise. And I've got 4 channels of 4-step sequencers modulating various different filters and the pan of the noise as well. So I can change that here. All right, the next thing we're gonna demo is this pre-input here. So I've got an SM57 here connected with an XLR to 1/4-inch jack here. So I'm just gonna patch that into the mic input here. So when you plug in on the mic channel, it gets forwarded into channel 6 here. So if you have something already patched in channel 6, that'll take precedence. So make sure it's not plugged in. And then channel 6, you get the mic. So I can bring up the preamp here, the gain, bring up the volume, check 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. So I find that the mic I guess with the SM57, which is super weak, I have to crank it all the way to 10 to get sort of a reasonable signal coming out. And of course you can mix in this mic signal now with the rest of your Eurorack stuff, or you can use the outputs here to feed it into some processing modules like run your voice through a filter or some other effects or sample it. All right, so I plugged in the outputs of my mixer going through the STS, which is a stereo sampler, and then from the sampler I'm going into my output. So effectively everything that's getting mixed into here is gonna be sampled by the sampler. So right now I just have my mic, so if I arm the recording and turn on monitoring, hello, check, check, you can hear my voice, and I can hit record, check 1, 2, and then I can forward to that bank.
Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2. It's coming out of there, and then if I synchronize these guys here.
Check 1,
2. Check 1, 2.
And of course I can feed a clock signal to trigger it. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, the next thing we're going to demo is using the line section of the external input here. So I've got this Digitakt plugged in. So I'm going to quickly explain how I did that. I have a standard insert cable, so it's got 2 inputs left and right here, and the Digitakt combined into 1 here. So when you set a stereo signal into the unit here and set it to line mode, your stereo signal appears on channels 5 and 6. So 5 is your left, 6 is your right. And same rules as the mic that I said before. If you patch something into the inputs directly here, those take precedence over that. So make sure you have nothing plugged in here if you want to use an external signal here. All right, same deal as before. I've just plugged in my stereo outputs into my interface here. And now I can hit play on the Digitakt. You can see it's playing. We can't hear anything, so I'm going to bring up channel 5, which is the left of the Digitakt, and channel 6, which is the right channel. And of course, we can separately pan it here in the module and create a stereo effect. And so, of course, I can pan the left channel hard left and the right channel hard right if I want to maintain that stereo image here. And just to demo that, I'm going to hit play and create a pan effect on the Digitakt. So if you're wearing headphones, you're going to hear it go left and right. So that's pretty cool. We've integrated the audio from our Digitakt into our modular here. So I'm going straight up to the outputs, but of course I can run it through filters or sample it using the sampler here. All right, so I've created a slightly more fun patch where we have a bass line going from the modular and a drum track going from the Digitakt. So again, MIDI clock out from the Digitakt using the clock here with a clock divider. And then I'm using that clock to feed the sequencer here and also to trigger this envelope generator. And then through the 510, I'm using an oscillator through filter and also a bit of noise that I've mixed in. So if I hit play now, we can hear the Digitakt is coming from the last 2 channels here. And then I can bring in my bass line here. have the filter control here. Of course, I can mute the kick here. And I'm also triggering the STS here with a clap sample that I can bring in my second channel here. I can change the pitch of that. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what the 531 can do. Again, to recap, 6-channel mixer, mute buttons for each channel, nice sliders, pan control. And I forgot to mention the pan knobs have a little notch in the middle so you can really be confident about when you hit center. CV control over pan, master volume, 2 sets of outputs depending on what format you want to use, an input for inputting a mic or a line level signal with a preamp, and a nice convenient headphone jack. Super useful module. Really digging it. It's a really great way to both perform your patches live. You can use it as synthesis for patching a bunch of oscillators and playing like an additive patch. You can have a bunch of loops going in and performing those. Or you can use it more as a utility thing where you pre-mix a set of signals that you feed into stereo modules or even 2 separate modules. So you can put you can hard pan left some signals and feed that as a batch to some modules, and then do another group bus, pan everything right, push it out of the right, and use it that way. So you can effectively treat this as kind of 2 small buses that you can pre-mix and route through other signals. So yeah, really convenient module to have in your arsenal. All right, so if you like this kind of stuff, make sure to like, subscribe, share it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.